Dr. Samuel Rivera was contemplating the existential horror of synthetic coffee when the announcement arrived. The bitter liquid, guaranteed to taste nothing like actual coffee while delivering twice the caffeine, had just touched his lips when the station's communication system crackled to life with the cheerful tone that always preceded terrible news. "Attention all research personnel," came the voice of Administrator Kellerman, whose ability to sound enthusiastic about bureaucratic disasters rivaled that of a carnival barker selling tickets to the apocalypse. The Galactic Council has issued Directive 7742B regarding mandatory interspecies matrimonial partnerships for all human researchers stationed beyond Earth's solar system. Samuel's cup froze halfway to his mouth. Around the mess hall, 30 other scientists exhibited varying degrees of shock, ranging from Dr. Patel's dignified raising of an eyebrow to Dr. Thompson's spectacular spit take that painted the nearest wall in synthetic caffeine. In the interest of promoting greater understanding between species, Kellerman continued with the relentless cheer of someone reading from a script while held at gunpoint. "All unmarried human personnel must select an alien spouse from our current diplomatic delegation within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate reassignment to the Pluto weather station." The silence that followed could have powered a small fusion reactor. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Samuel's closest friend and the station's leading expert in xenobiology, broke it with her characteristic blend of scientific curiosity and profanity. "Well, that's scientifically fascinating and personally horrifying," she announced, setting down her tablet with excessive care. "Anyone know if the diplomatic delegation includes species that reproduce by spore release? Because I have opinions about that." The mess hall erupted into panicked chatter as researchers began calculating their options with the desperate efficiency of people facing a cosmic-scale shotgun wedding. Samuel found himself oddly calm, perhaps because his brain had simply refused to process the absurdity of the situation. He finished his coffee, waste not, want not, even when facing bureaucratic insanity, and wandered toward the observation deck. The station Harmony's edge hung in the void between systems, a testament to humanity's ability to build functional ugliness anywhere in the galaxy. Its rotating rings provided artificial gravity through the magic of physics and the miracle of not asking too many questions about the engineering. Samuel had called it home for 3 years, long enough to memorize every bulkhead and develop a fondness for the way the stars wheeled past the viewports during rotation cycles. The diplomatic delegation had arrived 2 days ago in ships that made Harmony's Edge look like a particularly ambitious garage project. Zephyrians floated through the corridors with their crystalline voices and natural grace, while Alterans glowed softly as they moved, their bioluminescent skin patterns shifting with their emotions. The station had become a showcase of galactic diversity, complete with translation matrices working overtime and environmental systems struggling to accommodate 17 different atmospheric preferences. Samuel paused at the observation deck's entrance, watching the controlled chaos within. Researchers mingled with alien delegates in a scene that resembled a speed dating event organized by someone with a peculiar sense of humor and access to advanced technology. Dr. Chen was deep in conversation with a Zephyrian whose crystalline laughter sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Dr. Okafor nodded seriously as an Alteran's skin shifted through spectrums of meaning that the translation matrix rendered as poetry about quantum mechanics. But in the far corner, near the largest viewport, someone stood alone. She appeared human at first glance, auburn hair catching starlight, average height, the kind of understated presence that might blend into any crowd. But as Samuel moved closer, he noticed the delicate points of her ears extending beyond what human genetics would allow. She wore simple clothing that seemed to shift color subtly in the artificial light, and her hands rested motionless against the transparent aluminum of the viewport. "The quiet one's been there for hours," said Dr. Reeves, appearing at Samuel's elbow with the stealth that made him an excellent xenoarchaeologist and a terrible person to have coffee with. "Hasn't moved, hasn't spoken. The others think she might be broken." Samuel watched her profile against the star field beyond. Something about her stillness seemed intentional rather than vacant, like a statue that had chosen its pose rather than having it imposed. Broken how? Neural damage, maybe. Trauma response. The Centauri delegate tried to engage her earlier with that empathy projection thing they do, and got nothing back. Complete void. Reeves shrugged, already losing interest. I'm thinking about the tall one with the scales. Did you know draconian females can regulate their body temperature consciously? Imagine the possibilities for climate-controlled sleeping arrangements. The conversation around them continued, researchers cataloging the various advantages of potential alien spouses with the thoroughness of people comparison shopping for starships. Samuel found himself tuning it out, his attention drawn back to the silent figure by the viewport. As he watched, she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. She's beautiful, he said without thinking. Reeves followed his gaze and snorted. Sure, if you're into the strong, silent type who might actually be catatonic. Good luck getting meaningful conversation out of that one. He wandered off in pursuit of the scaled draconian, leaving Samuel alone with his grown. The bonding ceremony took place in the station's main assembly hall, which had been hastily decorated with holographic flowers that kept malfunctioning and turning into geometric shapes. Samuel stood at the improvised altar wearing his best lab coat, freshly sterilized and only slightly singed from last week's plasma containment breach, while his bride remained as enigmatically silent as ever. Do you, Samuel Rivera, take this? Administrator Kellerman paused, consulting his tablet with the expression of someone discovering their grocery list was written in ancient Sumerian. Individual of unspecified designation to be your lawfully bonded partner in accordance with Galactic Council Directive 7742-B. I do, Samuel replied, trying not to think about how this was probably the most romantic thing that had ever happened in a room primarily used for safety briefings about decompression protocols. The woman beside him, he'd started thinking of her as Stella, though he had no idea if she had a name or if she'd appreciate his presumption, stood perfectly still in the ceremonial robes someone had found in storage. They were designed for a species roughly human-shaped but with different proportions, giving her the appearance of someone wearing elegant hand-me-downs from a taller, thinner cousin. And do you, Kellerman continued, addressing Stella with the cautious tone of someone speaking to potentially malfunctioning equipment, take Samuel Rivera to be your lawfully bonded partner? The silence stretched long enough for Samuel to wonder if they were about to have the galaxy's first wedding interrupted by a bride who had simply wandered off mentally. Then Stella nodded once, the same economical gesture she'd used to accept his proposal. I'll take that as a yes, Kellerman announced with forced cheer. By the power vested in me by the Galactic Council and the emergency authority granted by Directive 7742-B, I now pronounce you bonded partners. You may now, exchange whatever traditional gestures your species consider appropriate. The holographic fireworks chose that moment to activate, filling the air with sparkles that looked suspiciously like the error messages from the station's waste recycling system. Samuel turned to face Stella, unsure of protocol and certain that whatever he did would be wrong. She solved the problem by extending her hand again, and he took it, noting absently that her pulse felt strange, too slow, too steady, like a metronome keeping time with something other than biology. The reception featured what the catering system optimistically called fusion cuisine, which meant dishes from 12 different worlds that had been designed by species with radically different concepts of what constituted food. Samuel watched Dr. Thompson attempt to cut something that looked like crystallized music while making polite conversation with his new Altaron wife, whose skin currently displayed patterns that the translation matrix rendered as mild contentment with undertones of digestive concern. This is either the most romantic thing I've ever seen or the most elaborate practical joke in galactic history, Elena observed, appearing at Samuel's elbow with a plate of something that might have been salad if salads were typically luminescent. How's married life treating you so far? Samuel glanced at Stella, who sat beside him with the stillness of someone posing for a portrait that would never be painted. She hadn't touched her food, hadn't spoken, and as far as he could tell, hadn't blinked in the past hour. It's quiet. Quiet is good, Elena said diplomatically. Quiet means she's not telling you how to optimize your research methods or explaining why your filing system violates 3 principles of information theory. She lowered her voice. Though I have to ask, has she shown any signs of actual consciousness since the ceremony? Because I'm starting to wonder if you've married an extremely sophisticated art installation. Before Samuel could answer, the station's AI chimed in with its characteristically helpful commentary. Dr. Rivera, I've been attempting to run standard compatibility protocols for your bonding partner, but I'm encountering some unusual difficulties. What kind of difficulties, Marcus? Well, for starters, her neural crown appears to be completely inactive, which shouldn't be possible given that she's clearly responsive to external stimuli. Additionally, my bioscanners are having trouble getting consistent readings. One moment she registers as perfectly human, the next moment she doesn't register at all. Elena raised an eyebrow. That's either fascinating or terrifying. Possibly both. Furthermore, Marcus continued with the enthusiasm of an AI that had discovered a genuinely puzzling problem. Her genetic markers don't match any known alien species in the diplomatic database. In fact, they don't appear to be entirely consistent with each other, which raises some interesting questions about the nature of biological identity that I'd love to explore if anyone has 17 hours and access to a philosophy subroutine. Samuel looked at Stella again, noting the way she held her head at a slight angle, as if listening to something beyond human perception. Could she be from a species we haven't encountered before? Possible, but unlikely, Marcus replied. The diplomatic delegation was thoroughly screened before arrival. Every individual was catalogued, verified, and cross-referenced with known xenobiological databases. Your bride. Samuel woke on his third day of marriage to find his research files alphabetized by xenolinguistic complexity rather than date, his coffee programmed to brew at precisely the optimal temperature for human caffeine absorption, and his wife arranging his breakfast plates in what appeared to be a mathematical sequence that made his head hurt to contemplate. Good morning, Stella, he ventured, testing the name again. She glanced at him briefly before returning to her geometric breakfast arrangement, moving his synthesized eggs 2 centimeters to the left with the precision of someone solving an equation that existed entirely in spatial relationships. Marcus, Samuel called out, settling into his chair and watching Stella create patterns with his morning meal. Any luck with those compatibility protocols? I'm afraid your wife continues to exist in a state of cheerful impossibility, the AI replied. However, I have noticed some interesting correlations. Every time she rearranges objects in your quarters, the station's navigation systems recalibrate themselves. Yesterday's plate configuration apparently optimized our orbital trajectory by 0.003%. Samuel paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. She's what now? Oh yes, it's quite fascinating. Her furniture arrangements have improved air circulation efficiency by 12%, and whatever she did to your sock drawer has somehow enhanced the quantum resonance of your research terminal. I'd ask her how she does it, but she seems to be operating under a strict no-verbal communication policy. Elena chose that moment to arrive, looking harried and carrying a data pad covered in equations that seemed to writhe when viewed peripherally. Samuel, please tell me your mysteriously silent wife knows something about quantum mechanics, because the station's computers just spontaneously solved 3 problems I've been working on for months. Which problems? Samuel asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The ones I was discussing with Dr. Okafor yesterday during lunch. You know, the theoretical calculations about gravitational wave propagation that I definitely didn't input into any system because they're classified research. Elena stared at Stella, who was now folding Samuel's napkin into shapes that hurt to look at directly. How did she even hear that conversation? She was 3 tables away and showed no signs of paying attention to anything except her untouched salad. Samuel considered this, watching his wife create origami that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the napkin should technically possess. Maybe she's a very good listener. Samuel, very good listener, doesn't explain how she solved problems involving mathematics that haven't been invented yet. Elena sat down uninvited and pulled up holographic displays that made the air shimmer with complex equations. Look at these solutions. They're not just correct, they're elegant. Whoever worked these out understands quantum mechanics better than species that evolved with natural mathematical intuition. Marcus chimed in helpfully. Perhaps Mrs. Rivera is simply very, very smart and enjoys expressing herself through interpretive household management. She's not Mrs. Rivera, Samuel protested. We don't even know her actual name. What should I call her then? The enigmatic person who has accidentally optimized 17 different station systems while pretending to be furniture. Before Samuel could answer, his pet data fish, a small holographic creature that lived in his research terminal and helped organize linguistic databases, suddenly began performing aerial acrobatics it had never exhibited before. The tiny projection zipped through complex patterns that looked suspiciously like the star chart Stella had accessed on their wedding night. Did you teach Fibonacci new tricks? Elena asked, watching the data fish spell out mathematical sequences in midair. No, Fibonacci, what are you doing? Samuel leaned closer to the holographic display, where his digital pet was now drawing constellation patterns that definitely weren't in its original programming. Stella looked up from her napkin folding, and for a brief moment, her eyes met those of the data fish. Something passed between them, not communication exactly, but recognition. Fibonacci completed one final loop and settled back into its normal lazy swimming pattern, as if nothing had happened. Well, that wasn't ominous at all, Elena muttered. Samuel, I think your wife might be some kind of technological savant. Or possibly an alien computer that's very good at looking human. She's not a computer, Samuel said, though he couldn't explain how he knew this with such certainty. She's just different. Different doesn't cover it. Dr. Thompson's wife glows and speaks in mathematical poetry, but she still acts like a person. Dr. Patel's Zephyrian spouse can sing in frequencies that heal minor injuries, but she laughs at his terrible jokes and gets excited about his research. Your wife reorganizes reality as a hobby and shows all the emotional responsiveness of highly sophisticated laboratory equipment. Samuel found himself oddly defensive. She nodded when I proposed. That's emotional responsiveness. Once. She nodded once. In 3 days. Elena gestured at Stella, who had moved on to arranging Samuel's research materials in patterns that probably violated several laws of physics. Has she eaten anything? Slept? Shown any signs of basic biological functions? The honest answer was no, but Samuel had been avoiding thinking about it too hard. Stella moved through their shared quarters like someone who existed slightly outside normal time, her presence constant but somehow not entirely there. She never seemed to sleep, though she would stand motionless by the viewport during the station's night cycle, her reflection creating strange double images in the transparent aluminum. Maybe she's just adjusting to married life, Samuel suggested weakly. Or maybe she's an elaborate practical joke that's gotten out of hand. Elena called up more data displays, showing readings from throughout the station. Look at these efficiency reports. Every system she's been near shows improved performance. The recycling processors in your section are operating at 127% of standard capacity. The gravity generators have stabilized to tolerances we've never achieved before. Even the coffee makers on your deck are producing beverages that actually taste like what they're supposed to be. Samuel glanced at his cup, which did indeed contain the first genuinely coffee-like substance he'd encountered since arriving at the station. That's actually pretty wonderful. It's impossible, Samuel. Matter replicators don't spontaneously improve their programming just because someone walks past them. Unless. Samuel's investigation into his wife's impossible existence began with the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that made tax audits look like pleasant social gatherings. After 3 hours of navigating the Galactic Council's database through forms that required forms to access forms, he discovered something that made his synthetic coffee taste even worse than usual. Stella didn't exist. Not in any official capacity, anyway. According to every registry, census, and diplomatic manifest in the galaxy's most comprehensive bureaucratic system, the woman arranging his lunch into fractals had never been born, never been assigned an identity code, and certainly had never been cleared for diplomatic missions to human research stations. This is either a clerical error of galactic proportions or we're dealing with something that operates outside normal administrative channels, Marcus observed with the kind of cheerful curiosity that made Samuel suspect the AI enjoyed mysteries more than was healthy for a computer. I've cross-referenced her biometric data, what little I can get, with every known species database, and the results are fascinatingly contradictory. Contradictory how? Samuel asked, watching Stella fold his napkin into a shape that seemed to exist in 11 dimensions while somehow remaining perfectly flat. Well, her genetic markers match 17 different species, none of which should be able to interbreed, exist in the same galactic region, or share more than basic carbon-based chemistry. It's like trying to solve an equation where X equals both 7 and purple simultaneously. Samuel pulled up holographic displays showing historical records of the station's previous diplomatic visits, hoping to find some precedent for cosmic bureaucratic confusion. What he found instead made him question whether the universe had a particularly twisted sense of humor. Every 47 years, dating back to the station's founding, someone matching Stella's exact description appeared in security footage. Always silent, always assigned to human researchers, always departing without any record of how or when they left. The images were frustratingly similar, same auburn hair, same pointed ears, same dark eyes that seemed to hold more than any single lifetime should contain. Either your wife is remarkably well preserved for someone who's been visiting this station since before you were born, Marcus commented, or we're dealing with a species that takes family resemblance to uncomfortable extremes. Samuel enhanced the oldest image, taken 73 years ago during the station's first diplomatic exchange. The woman standing beside Dr. Adelaide Voss looked exactly like Stella, down to the way she held her head at that particular angle while listening to something beyond human perception. Dr. Voss was a xenolinguist too, Samuel murmured, reading the historical files. Specialized in dead languages, just like me. She made several breakthrough discoveries during her tenure here, decoding texts that had puzzled scholars for centuries. Curious coincidence, Marcus agreed. Though I should mention that Dr. Voss's research notes from that period are classified at levels that require authorization from species I'm not entirely certain exist anymore. Elena chose that moment to burst into his quarters with the manic energy of someone who had discovered either the secrets of the universe or a really good conspiracy theory. Samuel, you need to see this. Your wife isn't just impossible, she's historically impossible. I know. I found the records too. Not just station records. I accessed the archives from 17 different research installations across the galaxy. Elena's holographic displays filled the air with faces that looked disturbingly familiar. She's been everywhere, Samuel. Every major xenolinguistic breakthrough in the past 2 centuries has involved a human researcher working alongside a silent alien woman with pointed ears who doesn't officially exist. Samuel studied the images, noting the same pattern in each one, the human researcher making revolutionary discoveries while their enigmatic partner stood quietly in the background, never claiming credit, never speaking, never leaving any trace beyond their presence in a few casual photographs. It's like she's some kind of academic guardian angel, Elena continued, except guardian angels usually don't spend their time optimizing space station recycling systems. As if summoned by the mention of her extracurricular activities, Stella appeared in the doorway with the silent precision of someone who had been listening to a conversation that wasn't quite happening yet. She moved to Samuel's research terminal and began accessing files with the casual confidence of someone who owned the equipment. How does she even know our access codes? Elena whispered. I don't think she needs them, Samuel replied, watching Stella navigate through classified databases that should have required authorization from 3 different agencies. I think she just knows things. The terminal displayed star charts that definitely weren't in any official database, regions of space marked with symbols that predated known galactic cartography. Stella traced patterns across the display, and the charts began updating themselves, showing course corrections and navigation data that made Samuel's brain hurt to contemplate. Those coordinates, Elena said, her voice carrying the tone of someone who recognized something they desperately wished they didn't. They're pointing toward the void reaches. The empty sectors where probe signals go dark and survey ships don't come back. Stella turned from the terminal and looked directly at Elena with an intensity that made the xenobiologist take an involuntary step backward. For a moment, something flickered in those dark eyes. Not recognition exactly, but acknowledgement that Elena had spoken words that mattered. She's trying to tell us something, Samuel said, though he had no idea how he knew this with such certainty. Or she's trying to lead us somewhere we really shouldn't go, Elena replied. Samuel, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully about the answer. Since you've been married, have you noticed any changes in your research patterns? New interests? Sudden insights into problems you couldn't solve before? Samuel considered the question and felt something cold settle in his stomach. I've been having dreams about languages I've never encountered. Waking up with solutions to translation problems I hadn't even started working on yet. That's what I was afraid of. Elena pulled up more data displays, showing brain scans and neural activity patterns. I've been monitoring all the human researchers since the bonding ceremonies. Everyone who married an alien spouse is showing enhanced cognitive performance in their areas of expertise. But the spouses from known species are showing corresponding changes, shared neural patterns, synchronized brain activity. And Stella? Stella doesn't show up on the scans at all. It's like she's not there, even when she's standing right next to you. Elena gestured at the woman who was now examining Samuel's bookshelf with the focused attention of someone cataloging an inventory. Whatever she is, she's not sharing consciousness with you. She's downloading it. The implications hit Samuel like a cargo hauler at full throttle. You think she's stealing my thoughts? I think she's collecting them, Elena corrected. Along with the thoughts of every xenolinguist she's ever worked with. Samuel, what if these diplomatic marriages aren't random bureaucratic nonsense? What if someone is systematically gathering human expertise in dead languages and extinct civilizations? The universe, Samuel reflected as reality unraveled around him, had a remarkably poor sense of timing. Just when he'd started to appreciate the simple pleasures of marriage to an enigmatic alien who organized his socks by quantum resonance frequency, the galaxy decided to end. Stella's hand remained pressed against the viewport while space itself rewrote its fundamental laws outside. The approaching ships weren't moving through normal physics but sliding between dimensions like thoughts changing their minds. Samuel watched his wife's reflection multiply in the transparent aluminum until it looked like she was arguing with several versions of herself. Marcus, Samuel called out, please tell me you have some cheerfully optimistic explanation for what's happening. I'm afraid optimism is in short supply at the moment, the AI replied with uncharacteristic sobriety. The approaching vessels appear to be displacing local space-time by existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Also, your wife just accessed the station's main communication array without using any visible interface, which raises some fascinating questions about the nature of consciousness and unauthorized system penetration. Elena burst through the door carrying emergency equipment and wearing the expression of someone who had run out of scientific explanations and moved on to creative profanity. Samuel, the other alien spouses are all doing the same thing. Standing at viewports, accessing systems they shouldn't be able to touch, and generally behaving like cosmic alarm clocks that just went off after a very long nap. Stella's not an alarm clock, Samuel protested, though he wasn't entirely certain what she actually was anymore. Fine, she's a beacon. A signal amplifier. A galactic wake-up call. Elena gestured at the multiplying reflections in the viewport. The point is, they're all connected to whatever's coming, and we're about to find out whether we're witnessing a rescue mission or the universe's most elaborate conquest strategy. Stella finally turned from the viewport, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made Samuel's bones vibrate in frequencies he hadn't known existed. The silence is ending. Well, that's ominous, Elena muttered. Though I suppose it's progress that she's finally talking, even if what she's saying sounds like the opening line of a cosmic horror story. Samuel found himself stepping closer to his wife, driven by instincts that predated rational thought. Stella, who are you really? Her dark eyes focused on his face with an intensity that felt like being examined by starlight. We are the archivists. The keepers of what was forgotten. The guardians of voices that fell silent when civilizations ended. She gestured toward the impossible ships materializing around the station. We scattered ourselves across time and space, living as echoes, recording the rise and fall of worlds while suppressing our own existence to avoid changing the stories we were meant to preserve. You're historians? Elena asked. Really? The mysterious alien conspiracy turns out to be a cosmic library science project? We are memory itself, Stella continued, her voice carrying the weight of eons. When species die, when languages vanish, when entire civilizations fade from the galaxy's recollection, we ensure that some trace remains. We bond with those who study the dead tongues, the lost cultures, the silent archives of what once was. Samuel felt pieces clicking into place with the satisfying precision of a puzzle solving itself. That's why you were drawn to xenolinguists. That's why you've been appearing throughout history wherever dead languages were being studied. And that's why the Galactic Council suddenly decided human researchers needed alien spouses, Elena added with growing understanding. Someone knew you were out there, knew you would respond to the call. Stella nodded, her expression carrying something that might have been relief at finally being understood. The Council serves those who remember deeper histories. They knew the silence was ending, that the Devourers were moving again between stars, consuming not just worlds but the very concept that those worlds had ever existed. Devourers? Samuel asked, though part of him already knew he didn't want the answer. Entities that feed on existence itself. They don't destroy civilizations, they unmake them, removing them from the timeline so completely that no trace remains, no memory survives, no record can prove they ever were. Stella's voice carried the kind of fear that came from witnessing the ultimate negation. We went into silence to hide from them, scattering ourselves so thinly across space and time that we became invisible even to ourselves. The station shuddered as one of the impossible ships drew alongside, its hull displaying geometries that human eyes couldn't quite process. Through the communication system, voices began speaking in languages that sounded like mathematics given form, like equations that had learned to sing. And now you're waking up, Elena said. All of you. Because the Devourers are moving again. Because the galaxy has forgotten how to remember, Stella corrected. Civilizations rise and fall so quickly now, leaving behind so little that matters. When the Devourers come, there will be nothing left to preserve, no voices worth saving. She looked at Samuel with eyes that held the weight of stars. Unless we teach the living species how to create memories that survive oblivion. Samuel understood then why he'd been drawn to her, why their marriage had felt less like choice and more like inevitability. You needed someone who specializes in dead languages because you're planning to make sure new languages don't die. We are planning to make the galaxy remember how to be worth remembering, Stella said, her hand finding his with the same warmth he'd felt during their first meeting. But we cannot do it alone. The archivists have preserved the past, but we need partners who understand the present, who can bridge the gap between what was and what might be. Elena laughed, the sound carrying relief and wonder in equal measure. So the cosmic conspiracy is actually a marriage counseling program designed to save the universe through improved communication skills. Essentially, yes, Marcus chimed in cheerfully. Though I should mention that 17 more archivist vessels just materialized around the station, and they appear to be broadcasting what I can only describe as the universe's most comprehensive orientation program. The ships began transmitting directly into the minds of everyone aboard Harmony's Edge, not invasive thoughts but shared experiences, memories of civilizations that had thrived across the galaxy, languages that captured concepts human words couldn't express, art forms that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. Samuel felt his understanding of existence expand as knowledge flowed into him from sources older than his species. This is either the most educational experience of my life or the most elaborate alien recruitment campaign in galactic history, Elena said, her eyes wide as information cascaded through her consciousness. Both, Stella replied, and Samuel heard something in her voice he hadn't noticed before, not just the weight of ages, but warmth, affection, the sound of someone who had rediscovered what it meant to hope. We have been alone with the universe's memories for so long that we forgot what it felt like to share them. Samuel squeezed her hand, feeling the pulse beneath her skin synchronize with his own heartbeat. So what happens now? Now we teach the galaxy how to create stories worth preserving. We show civilizations how to leave traces that survive even the devourers. And we learn what it means to be partners rather than guardians. Stella smiled, and this time the expression carried nothing but joy. Also, we continue to optimize the station's recycling systems, because apparently I cannot stop myself from improving broken things. Well, Elena said, watching through the viewport as space filled with vessels carrying the accumulated wisdom of eons, at least married life won't be boring. Samuel looked at his wife, his partner, his fellow guardian of impossible memories, and realized that in choosing to marry a stranger, he had somehow chosen to help save the universe. It was either the most romantic thing that had ever happened or the most elaborate practical joke in cosmic history. He decided he was perfectly fine with either option. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns while new stories began, and somewhere in the space between memory and possibility, the future wrote itself in languages that had never existed but would now never be forgotten.